The island of Bali rises from the Java Sea like a jewel forged in volcanic fire and blessed by ancient gods. Its terraced rice paddies cascade down mountainsides in perfect geometric harmony. While temple spires pierce the sky at every turn, their stone guardians watching over villages that have stood for countless generations. This is a place where the sacred and the mundane exist not as separate realms, but as threads woven into a single tapestry, where offerings of flowers and incense mark doorways, sidewalks, and street corners, where the boundary between the seen and unseen world remains as thin and permeable as morning mist. To walk through Bali is to walk through a living museum of belief, where every rock, every tree, every shadow holds the potential for divine presence or malevolent force. But before we journey deeper into this realm of spirits and supernatural darkness, I invite you to join our community of seekers and storytellers. Subscribe to Echoes of the Old World, where we explore the myths and legends that have shaped human consciousness across cultures and centuries. Ring that notification bell, because the stories we uncover here are not mere entertainment. They are windows into the souls of civilizations, reflections of our deepest fears and highest aspirations. And speaking of community, take a moment right now to leave a comment below. Tell me, from which corner of the world are you watching this? Are you in a bustling city or a quiet countryside? I want to know who walks this path of discovery alongside us. Now, let us return to Bali and the truth that pulses beneath its beauty. The Balinese cosmology rests upon a concept as old as consciousness itself, Arwaiwa Bineda, the doctrine of duality and cosmic balance. This is not the simplistic battle between absolute good and absolute evil that Western philosophy often presents. Instead, it is an understanding that light cannot exist without shadow, that creation requires destruction, that life feeds upon death in an eternal cycle that neither begins nor ends, but simply is. The Balinese do not seek to eliminate darkness, for they know such an endeavor would be as foolish as trying to eliminate night itself. Rather, they maintain balance, offering prayers to both benevolent deities and appeasing malevolent forces, recognizing that harmony comes not from victory, but from equilibrium. Within this philosophy of balance exists a figure that embodies the shadow side of human and supernatural power. She is called the Leyak, and her very existence challenges our comfortable assumptions about of evil and the face it wears. The Leyak is not some distant demon dwelling in an underworld realm, nor is she an abstract force of malevolence. She is your neighbor, the woman who greets you at the market, the elderly widow who lives at the edge of the village, the healer who knows the old ways and the secret names of plants. By day, she appears as ordinary as any other member of the community, perhaps even respected, perhaps even loved. But when darkness falls and the living retreat behind their walls, she undergoes a transformation so grotesque and unnatural that it defies the laws of anatomy, physics, and sanity itself. The Leyak practitioner, for that is what she truly is, a human who has learned forbidden arts and paid terrible prices for dark knowledge, performs a ritual that tears her very essence apart. In the privacy of her home, surrounded by offerings to malevolent spirits and ancient texts written in scripts no priest would dare translate, she separates her head from her body. This is not metaphor, not symbol, but literal separation. The skull detaching with a sound, witnesses describe as wet, tearing fabric mixed with the crack of splintering bone. The head rises into the air, trailing behind it the entrails, the lungs, the heart, all the organs that should remain internal and hidden, now exposed and dangling like obscene ribbons. Her tongue extends to impossible lengths, transforming into a flickering flame of blue or greenish fire that illuminates her path through the night sky. This is the Leyak in her true form. A nightmare made flesh, or rather, a nightmare made of flesh torn free from its proper containment. Why would anyone choose such a fate? What drives a human being to pursue magic so dark that it literally tears them apart? The answers are as complex as human motivation itself. Some Leyak are said to seek power over life and death, the ability to curse enemies and protect loved ones through supernatural means. Others crave revenge, nursing grudges so deep that no earthly punishment satisfies their hunger for retribution. Still others are driven by greed, using their abilities to steal vital essence from the living, to extend their own lives by consuming the life force of others. And some, the most tragic perhaps, inherit their dark gift unwillingly, born into lineages of practitioners where the knowledge passes from mother to daughter like a curse that cannot be broken, only accepted. What makes the Leyak truly terrifying is not merely her grotesque appearance, though that alone would be sufficient to drive mortals to madness. It is her hunger, specific and cruel, that reveals the depth of her malevolence. The Leyak feeds primarily on two categories of victims: pregnant women carrying new life in their wombs, and children weakened by illness whose defenses are already compromised. She seeks out the most vulnerable members of the community, those who represent hope and future, innocence and potential. When she finds her prey, she uses her elongated tongue to pierce the abdomen, to reach inside and consume the blood, the organs, the very essence of life itself. She leaves behind husks, bodies that may continue breathing for a time, but are already dead, drained of everything that made them human. This specificity of victimhood is not random cruelty, but reveals the Leyak's role within the cosmic balance. She is the embodiment of threats to community continuity, the manifestation of every parent's nightmare, the shadow that falls across new life. In traditional Balinese society, where infant mortality was tragically high and childbirth carried mortal danger, the Leyak provided an explanation for inexplicable loss. When a healthy pregnancy ended in stillbirth, when a laughing child sickened and died within days, when a new mother hemorrhaged and could not be saved, the community did not blame random chance or biological misfortune. They blamed the Leyak, and in that blame found both meaning and a target for their grief-driven rage. But here is the paradox that defines the Leyak and makes her more than a simple monster in a cautionary tale. She exists because balance requires her existence. The Balinese do not believe evil can be eradicated, only managed, only kept in check through constant vigilance and proper ritual observance. The Leyak is the darkness that defines the light, the danger that makes safety precious, the malevolence that gives meaning to protection. Without her, there would be no need for the intricate system of offerings, blessings, and purifications that structure Balinese religious life. Without her, the balance would tip, and an imbalanced cosmos is far more dangerous than one containing controlled darkness. So understand this as we begin our journey into the realm of the Leyak. She is not an aberration, but an integral part of a functioning cosmology. She is not insane, but following her own terrible logic. She is not other, but woven into the fabric of Balinese existence, feared and fought, and yet somehow necessary. To know the Leyak is to know the shadow side of paradise, to understand that beauty and horror share the same soil, and that the veil between worlds is not a barrier, but a threshold that powerful beings cross with terrifying ease. The night is falling over Bali, and in that darkness, something ancient is beginning to stir. Imagine twilight descending upon a Balinese village, that sacred hour when the world transitions from the realm of human activity to the domain of spirits and shadows. The gamelan orchestras fall silent, their metallic voices that filled the afternoon now resting until tomorrow's ceremonies. Farmers return from the rice paddies, their tools cleaned and stored, their bodies tired from honest labor. Children are called inside from their games, their laughter fading as mothers secure windows and doors, not merely against human intruders, but against forces far more insidious. The entire community performs this nightly ritual of retreat and protection, lighting oil lamps, burning sacred incense, placing fresh offerings at household shrines, creating barriers both physical and spiritual against what prowls when darkness claims the island. But while honest villagers prepare for sleep, while families gather for evening meals and prayers, in certain homes a different kind of preparation is taking place. The Leyak practitioner moves through her dwelling with practiced efficiency, closing shutters from the inside, drawing curtains that no one must part, ensuring absolute privacy for what she is about to become. Her home, which by day appears unremarkable, perhaps even humble, transforms into a ritual chamber where ancient magic supersedes natural law. She lights specific candles in specific arrangements, their flames casting shadows that seem to move with purpose and intelligence. She speaks words in languages older than Sanskrit, invocations that make the air itself feel thick and resistant, as though reality is being bent to accommodate something that should not exist. The transformation does not happen all at once, for such profound violation of natural order requires careful preparation and terrible willpower. The practitioner first enters a trance state, her consciousness fragmenting as she calls upon the dark entities that grant her power. These are not the benevolent deities worshipped in temple ceremonies, not the gods who accept offerings of flowers and fruit. These are the hungry spirits that dwell in graveyards and cremation grounds, the ancient forces that fed on fear long before humans built their first villages. They answer her call because she has paid their price, because she has offered them things we dare not name, because she has crossed thresholds that can never be recrossed in the opposite direction. What happens next defies every law of biology, physics, and reason that governs the natural world. The practitioner's form begins to change, not through gradual metamorphosis, but through sudden, violent separation. Her essence divides, consciousness splitting between what remains earthbound and what rises into supernatural flight. Witnesses who have glimpsed this moment through cracks in shutters or gaps in walls describe it as reality itself breaking, as though the universe momentarily forgets its own rules and allows the impossible to manifest. The head detaches, not through cutting or breaking, but through pure magical force, rising into the air while maintaining its terrible animation and awareness. But let us be clear about what separates. For the Leyak's flying form is not merely a skull or severed head. It is her consciousness made mobile, her hunger given wings, her malevolent will freed from the constraints of a complete human body. Her features remain recognizable yet transformed, eyes now glowing with an internal light that has nothing to do with reflected flame, mouth stretched wider than any jaw should open, revealing teeth that seem sharper than intended. Her tongue extends beyond all anatomical possibility, becoming an appendage of impossible length that glows with eerie luminescence, flickering blue or green, or sometimes a sickly yellow that makes observers' stomachs turn. This grotesque extension serves as both weapon and sensory organ, tasting the air for traces of vulnerable life, for the scent of fresh blood and new breath that signals potential prey. The flying Leyak trails behind her certain vital essences, certain internal elements that normally remain contained and hidden, now exposed to the night air in defiance of all that should be. We will not dwell on these anatomical impossibilities, for to describe them in detail would be to invite the very violation of natural order that the Leyak represents. Suffice to say that what flies through the Balinese night is neither fully alive nor completely dead, neither entirely human nor Holy Spirit, but something that exists in the liminal space between states of being. She is transformation incarnate, proof that the boundaries we believe absolute are actually permeable for those willing to pay the terrible price of crossing them. Meanwhile, what remains behind in the darkened house is equally disturbing to contemplate. The practitioner's body does not die or collapse, but enters a state of suspended animation, lying motionless, yet somehow still tethered to the consciousness that now flies free. This connection is invisible yet vital, a thread of magical energy that can be severed only through specific counter-magic or the destruction of one of the separated parts. The body lies vulnerable, defenseless, a husk that would appear as a corpse to any observer who did not know it's true. This is why the Leyak guards her privacy so jealously, why she ensures that no one can enter her home during the transformation. For if her body were discovered in this state, she could be destroyed before her flying consciousness could return and reunite. The psychological impact of witnessing a Leyak transformation or encountering her in flight cannot be overstated. This is not the clean terror of meeting a predator or the intellectual fear of an abstract threat. This is visceral horror that attacks the very foundation of what the mind believes possible. The human brain, confronted with something that violates its basic understanding of anatomy, physics, and life itself, often simply breaks. Witnesses report lasting trauma, recurring nightmares, and inability to ever feel safe after dark. Some develop a paranoia so profound that they scrutinize every neighbor, every friendly face, wondering if behind that ordinary exterior lurks a practitioner waiting for nightfall to reveal her true. Yet the Leyak's power is not unlimited, and her transformed state carries its own vulnerabilities and constraints. She must return before dawn, before the first light of sunrise breaks over the eastern horizon, for daylight is anathema to her separated form. If caught outside her home when morning comes, if unable to reunite her consciousness with her waiting body, she faces a fate worse than death, a dissolution into something neither spirit nor flesh, but a screaming fragment of awareness trapped between worlds forever. This deadline creates urgency in her nightly hunts, a desperation that makes her even more dangerous as the hours before dawn dwindle. The transformation also leaves traces, signs that the observant can recognize. The Leyak's home might emit strange odors during the night, acrid and unpleasant, like sulfur mixed with decay. Animals refuse to approach, dogs whining and backing away even from familiar dwellings when the practitioner is in her separated state. The air around her house feels different, thicker, harder to breathe, as though the atmosphere itself recoils from what transpires within. These signs are subtle, easy to miss or dismiss, but the traditional Balinese know them well and give such places a wide berth after sunset. Understand that what we have described is not fantasy or exaggeration, but the genuine belief system of millions of people for whom the Leyak is as real as the rice they harvest and the gods they worship. To dismiss this as mere superstition is to miss the profound truth embedded in the myth. The Leyak represents the terror of hidden malevolence, the fear that evil wears a familiar face, the nightmare that those we trust might harbor in human hunger. She is transformation as violation, power as corruption, and hunger as curse. When night falls over Bali and ordinary people retreat behind their protections, the Leyak rises and the hunt begins. Picture a Balinese village at midday, when the tropical sun bleaches the stone pathways white and the air shimmers with heat. The morning market bustles with activity, vendors arranging pyramids of mangosteen and rambutan, their voices calling out prices and greetings in the rhythmic cadence of daily commerce. Women in sarongs and kebayas negotiate over fresh fish and vegetables, their hands moving with practiced efficiency as they select ingredients for the evening meal. Children weave between the stalls, laughing and chasing each other, their energy seemingly inexhaustible despite the oppressive humidity. This is ordinary life, the mundane reality of human existence that repeats itself in villages across the island and across the world. A scene so familiar that it could lull anyone into believing that daylight holds no secrets. But look more carefully at the woman selecting offerings at the flower stall. Notice how her neighbors greet her with respect, how the vendor gives her the freshest jasmine blooms without her even asking. She might be a grandmother, her face lined with the wisdom of decades, her movements slow but dignified. Perhaps she is known as a healer, someone who understands which leaves cure fever and which roots ease the pain of childbirth. Maybe she is simply a widow, living alone in a modest compound at the village edge, supporting herself through small acts of service to the community. She appears as normal as anyone else in the market, perhaps more respected than most, certainly more knowledgeable about the old ways that younger generations are beginning to forget. This is the terrible genius of the Leyak's dual existence. The reason she inspires a fear that goes beyond mere physical danger into the realm of existential dread. She does not announce herself, does not mark herself as other or dangerous during daylight hours. There is no brand upon her forehead, no shadow that follows her differently, no telltale sign that the woman buying mangoes at noon will be flying through darkness at midnight, with her entrails trailing behind her like grotesque ribbons. The Leyak practitioner has mastered the art of ordinary existence, perfected the performance of normalcy so completely that her neighbors may live beside her for years, decades even, without suspecting the truth of what she becomes when night falls and shutters close. This duality serves multiple purposes within both the practitioner's life and the community's psychological landscape. For the Leyak herself, the ordinary persona is not merely camouflage, but necessity. She must eat, must maintain her home, must participate in the social and religious obligations that bind Balinese communities together. She cannot reveal her true without inviting destruction. For Balinese villages have methods of dealing with identified Leyak that are brutal and final. So she smiles at ceremonies, offers advice to young mothers, perhaps even leads prayers at household shrines. All while knowing that when darkness comes, she will hunt those same mothers, those same children, with inhuman hunger. The psychological compartmentalization required for such existence defies easy understanding, suggesting either profound moral corruption or a worldview so alien to normal human experience that we can barely comprehend its logic. But the impact of this duality extends far beyond the practitioner herself, poisoning the entire fabric of community trust. Consider what it means to live in a society where your neighbor might be a Leyak. Not could be in some abstract theoretical sense, but might actually be, with odds that feel disturbingly realistic given the number of unexplained illnesses and deaths that occur even in modern times. The elderly woman who helped deliver your child might be the one who returns in the night to consume that child's essence. The healer who cured your fever might be the source of your cousin's mysterious wasting disease. The respected elder who sits on the village council might separate her head from her body when everyone else sleeps, flying through darkness in search of vulnerable prey. This uncertainty creates a climate of perpetual vigilance and barely suppressed paranoia. Villagers watch each other with suspicious eyes, cataloging behaviors that might indicate hidden dark practice. Does that woman spend too much time alone? Does she avoid certain temples or ceremonies? Are there strange smells coming from her compound at night? Odd lights visible through cracks in her walls? Does she seem unusually healthy for her age, suggesting she might be sustaining herself through stolen life force? Every quirk of behavior, every deviation from expected norms, becomes potential evidence of Leyak practice. The community turns inward, policing itself through observation and gossip, creating informal but powerful systems of social surveillance designed to identify and contain the supernatural threat. Yet this surveillance system is imperfect by design, because the Leyak's power includes the ability to deflect suspicion through supernatural means. According to Balinese belief, a skilled practitioner can cloud minds, making people forget what they have seen or rationalize away evidence that should damn her. She can influence dreams, planting false memories or creating confusion about events witnessed during the previous night. She might even possess limited ability to curse those who investigate too closely, afflicting them with illness or misfortune that serves as warning to others who might consider exposing her. This supernatural defense makes confirmation nearly impossible, ensuring that suspicion rarely crystallizes into certainty, that accusations remain whispered rather than shouted. The psychological toll of this uncertainty cannot be overstated. Imagine living your entire life never quite certain who around you might be harboring monstrous hunger. Imagine the corrosive effect on trust, on the bonds of friendship and family that should provide security and comfort. Imagine scrutinizing every interaction, every gesture, searching for hidden meanings and dark intentions. This is the invisible wound that the Leyak inflicts upon Balinese communities, a damage that persists even when no actual attacks occur, a fear that poisons relationships and transforms neighbors into potential threats. The Leyak does not need to attack every night to exert her influence. Her mere possible existence is enough to reshape the entire social landscape. Traditional Balinese society developed elaborate responses to this uncertainty, creating social structures and behavioral norms designed to minimize Leyak risk without requiring impossible certainty about any individual's true. Villages maintain strict protocols about who enters homes after dark, about where pregnant women and sick children are kept, about which houses are avoided on moonless nights. These protocols function as communal protection, reducing vulnerability without necessitating direct accusation of specific individuals. The genius of this system is that it protects everyone while condemning no one, acknowledging the threat while avoiding the destructive paranoia that would result from constant witch hunts. But beneath these practical accommodations lies a deeper philosophical acceptance. The Balinese understand that duality is fundamental to existence, that the same person can contain both light and shadow, that the capacity for evil coexists with the capacity for good in every human heart. The Leyak practitioner is the extreme manifestation of this universal truth, the living embodiment of humanity's dark potential. She reminds the community that evil is not external, not something that invades from outside, but something that can grow within any of us, given the right circumstances, the wrong choices, the dark knowledge that should remain hidden. In this sense, every villager who greets the suspected Leyak politely at market is performing a complex moral calculus, treating her with the respect due to a community member while maintaining the vigilance necessary to protect against supernatural predation. This brings us to one of the most disturbing aspects of Leyak mythology: the question of how one becomes such a creature. Some traditions hold that the practice is inherited, passed from mother to daughter through secret teachings and forced initiation. A girl might grow up watching her mother perform the ritual separation, might be trained gradually in the dark arts until the night comes when she herself must separate for the first time. Other traditions suggest that the knowledge is learned willingly, sought out by those who crave power regardless of price, who make conscious choice to cross into forbidden territory. Still other stories speak of involuntary transformation, of curses that afflict victims and force them into Leyak existence, whether they desire it or not. Whichever origin story one believes, the result is the same: a human being who lives two lives, one visible and mundane, one hidden and monstrous. She is both member of the community and its greatest threat, both ordinary neighbor and supernatural predator. When you pass her in the market, when you nod greeting at the temple, when you accept her help or advice, you are interacting with only half of her reality. The other half waits for nightfall, waits for the moment when she can shed her human constraints, become what darkness allows her to be. There is a particular cruelty in the Leyak's choice of victims that reveals something profound about her evil. She does not hunt randomly, does not attack whoever happens to cross her path during her nightly flights. Her hunger is specific, deliberate, and calculatedly malevolent in ways that transcend mere predation. The Leyak seeks out the most vulnerable members of the community, those whose lives hang by threads already fragile, those who represent not just individual existence, but the very continuation of the village, the family, the lineage. She feeds upon potential, upon hope, upon the future itself made flesh in the form of unborn children, and the young ones whose breath still comes soft and uncertain. Pregnant women become prime targets for the Leyak's supernatural predation, and understanding why requires grasping the profound significance of pregnancy within traditional Balinese culture. A woman carrying life represents the culmination of countless blessings, the answer to prayers offered at temples and shrines, the fulfillment of duty to family and ancestors. Her swollen belly holds not just one life, but the continuation of an entire lineage. The next link in a chain stretching back through generations to the founding ancestors who first cleared the land and built the compounds. When the Leyak attacks a pregnant woman, she is not merely consuming one victim, but potentially destroying two lives, severing the thread that connects past to future, transforming promise into tragedy in a single night of horror. The mechanics of such attacks, as described in Balinese tradition, are as specific as they are disturbing. The Leyak, flying through darkness with her grotesque trailing form, uses supernatural senses to detect the unique life energy signature of pregnancy. She can taste it in the air, smell it through walls, sense it across distances that would baffle ordinary perception. Once she locates her prey, she approaches with terrible patience, circling the compound, testing the strength of protective barriers, searching for gaps in the spiritual defenses that every household maintains. She might spend hours in this reconnaissance, her glowing tongue flickering as she probes for weakness, her consciousness fully focused on the vulnerable life that waits within. When she finally strikes, the attack is swift and surgically precise. The Leyak's elongated tongue, that impossible extension that glows with unnatural light, becomes both tool and weapon. She uses it to pierce through spiritual protections first, weakening the invisible barriers that should shield the sleeper. Then, with a violation that transcends physical assault, she reaches into the woman's body, targeting specifically the womb where new life grows. What she extracts is not merely blood, though that too feeds her hunger, but something more essential, more fundamental to existence. The Balinese speak of it as life force, vital essence, the animating principle that separates the living from the dead. The Leyak consumes this essence, draining it away while leaving the physical forms intact but fundamentally diminished. The aftermath of such attacks manifests in ways that traditional medicine cannot address and modern medicine struggles to explain. The pregnant woman might wake feeling inexplicably weak, her strength sapped by something that leaves no visible marks or measurable symptoms. She might experience sudden complications, unexplained bleeding, a sense that something vital has been taken from her, though no examination reveals physical cause. In the worst cases, the pregnancy itself fails, the unborn child dying within the womb for reasons that baffle even experienced midwives. The family knows what has happened, even if they cannot prove it, even if the doctor speaks of natural causes and tragic coincidence. They know the Leyak has fed, and in that knowledge lies a grief compounded by helplessness and rage. But pregnant women are not the Leyak's only victims, for her hunger extends to children already born, particularly those weakened by illness or hovering in that uncertain space between health and death. A child suffering from fever, from the wasting diseases that traditional societies could not cure, from any affliction that leaves them vulnerable and diminished, becomes a beacon to the hunting Leyak. These young ones, their defenses already compromised by sickness, their vitality already drained by disease, offer easy prey for supernatural predation. The Leyak reads their weakness like writing on parchment, knows instinctively which children teeter on the edge and can be pushed into darkness with one more drain of their diminishing life force. The targeting of sick children serves multiple functions within the mythology and the culture that sustains it. On the practical level, it provides explanation for the tragically high child mortality rates that plagued traditional societies before modern medicine. When a child sickened and despite all care and prayers continued to decline, when fever would not break and breath grew shallower each day, when death came despite everything the family and community could do, the Leyak offered both explanation and a target for the unbearable grief of loss. Rather than accepting random misfortune or blaming inadequate care, the family could understand the death as attack, as malevolent intervention that could be fought against in future through stronger protections and more vigilant observance of spiritual protocols. On the deeper symbolic level, the Leyak's hunger for children represents the community's greatest fear made manifest. Every society measures its health and future by the survival of its children, by the percentage of young ones who live to maturity and themselves become parents, continuing the cycle. When children die, particularly in numbers that seem excessive or inexplicable, communities experience not just individual grief, but collective trauma, a sense that the future itself is under attack. The Leyak embodies this fear, personifies the invisible forces that steal children away, gives form to the dread that every parent experiences when their child falls ill, and medical knowledge proves insufficient. Consider the psychological impact on a mother who has lost a child to unexplained illness. The grief alone would be devastating. But add to it the belief that her child was specifically targeted, hunted, consumed by a supernatural predator who might be living disguised as a neighbor or even a relative. The mother must continue existing in the community, must see faces that might hide Leyak, must wonder if the woman who offered condolences was the same entity who drained her child's life force while flying through darkness. This compounds trauma in ways that modern psychology is only beginning to understand, creating wounds that never fully heal because the threat remains perpetual and the predator unidentified. The specificity of the Leyak's hunger also reveals something about the supernatural evil within Balinese cosmology. This is not random chaos or meaningless destruction, but purposeful, intelligent malevolence that understands exactly what will cause maximum damage to the community. By targeting the continuation of lineages, the Leyak attacks the very foundation of social structure. By consuming potential rather than established lives, she ensures that her impact extends far beyond individual victims into the realm of demographic catastrophe. A village that loses too many pregnant women and children cannot sustain itself, cannot replace its aging population, faces eventual extinction through simple attrition. The Leyak, in this sense, is not merely a monster, but an existential threat, a force that could theoretically destroy entire communities through sustained predation. Yet even in this darkness, the Balinese tradition finds meaning and purpose. The threat that the Leyak represents serves to strengthen communal bonds, to reinforce the importance of collective protection and mutual vigilance. When a pregnancy is announced, the entire village participates in creating protective frameworks around mother and unborn child. When a child falls ill, the community mobilizes not just medical care, but spiritual defense, surrounding the vulnerable one with layers of ritual, prayer, and blessed objects. The Leyak's hunger, terrible though it is, creates the context in which communal solidarity becomes not just desirable, but necessary for survival. Understand then that when night falls over Bali and the Leyak rises on her hunt, she seeks not just sustenance, but the very future of the community that both shelters and fears her. She flies through darkness with ancient hunger, seeking the soft breath of sleeping children, the double heartbeat of pregnant mothers, the vulnerable innocence that represents everything the community cherishes and must protect. Her shadow falls across cradles and birthing rooms. Her presence transforms every pregnancy into a vigil, and every childhood illness into a battle against forces that hunger for something more precious than gold or jewels or power. She hungers for life itself, for potential unrealized, for dreams that will never manifest, because she has consumed them before they could take full form in the world. Every dark power has an origin story, a moment when forbidden knowledge first entered the world and changed forever the relationship between humanity and the supernatural forces that surround us. The Leyak magic, like all truly dangerous knowledge, did not emerge from nothing but was birthed from the collision of human ambition with forces that should have remained beyond mortal reach. To understand how one becomes a Leyak is to understand the terrible price of power, the seductive of forbidden wisdom, and the fundamental truth that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. The origins of this dark art are shrouded in layers of mythology, religious syncretism, and the kind of knowledge that traditional societies preserve through whispered warnings rather than written texts. According to the oldest Balinese traditions, the knowledge of transformation and supernatural predation did not originate with humans at all, but descended from the realm of spirits and demons. Before humans walked the volcanic slopes of Bali, before the first rice terraces were carved into mountainsides, the island belonged to beings of pure energy and malevolent intent. These were not the benevolent gods who would later be worshipped in temple complexes, not the protective ancestral spirits who watch over family compounds. These were the hungry ghosts, the Leyak spirits from whom the practitioners take their name, entities that existed in the liminal spaces between life and death, feeding on fear and vital essence long before they found human vessels through which to operate more effectively. The transformation of these primordial spirits into a practice that humans could learn and master required a bridge, a moment of terrible communion between mortal and immortal realms. Balinese mythology speaks of the first practitioner, though her name varies across different villages and different tellings. Some call her Rangda, though this conflates the Leyak tradition with the demon queen of Balinese theater and ritual. Others reference ancient widows who, consumed by grief and rage at personal tragedies, called out to the darkness and found it answered their pleas with offers of power. Still others speak of royal priests who delved too deeply into forbidden texts, who translated manuscripts that should have remained sealed, who performed experiments that blurred the boundaries between religious practice and black magic. What remains consistent across these origin stories is the element of transgression, the crossing of boundaries that society and religion had established as absolute. The first Leyak did not stumble accidentally into her power, but sought it deliberately, making conscious choice to violate taboos that protected both individual and community. She might have consumed forbidden substances, eaten flesh that Balinese law designated as impure or sacred. She might have performed rituals in places designated as too holy or too cursed for human presence. Graveyards at midnight, cremation grounds where the boundaries between worlds grew thin. She might have spoken names that should never be voiced aloud, invocations that summoned entities with whom mortals should never bargain. The transmission of Leyak knowledge follows patterns that reveal both its power and its curse. In some lineages, the practice passes from mother to daughter through forced inheritance, a terrible gift that cannot be refused. A young girl watches her mother perform the ritual separation, witnesses the transformation that should be impossible, and understands gradually that this same fate awaits her. The mother does not teach from cruelty, but from necessity, for the knowledge itself demands continuation. If a practitioner dies without passing on her skills, the hungry spirits she has served throughout her life turn their attention to her family, afflicting them with misfortune and disease, until someone agrees to take up the practice and restore the dark communion. Other traditions speak of voluntary apprenticeship, seekers who approach known practitioners and beg to be taught the forbidden arts. These supplicants are driven by various motivations, each as complex and troubling as human itself. Some seek revenge against enemies who have escaped mundane justice, desiring supernatural power to inflict suffering that courts and councils cannot deliver. Others crave the intoxication of power itself, the godlike ability to fly through darkness, to drain life force from victims, to exist outside the normal constraints that bind ordinary mortals. Still others are motivated by fear, believing that in a world where Leyak exist, the only true safety lies in becoming one yourself, in possessing power sufficient to deter other practitioners from targeting your family. The initiation process, when it occurs through voluntary apprenticeship, requires the candidate to prove their commitment through increasingly transgressive acts. The teacher does not simply hand over knowledge like a craftsman instructing an apprentice in pottery or weaving. Instead, she tests the student's willingness to violate every social, moral, and spiritual boundary that defines civilized existence. The candidate might be required to steal offerings from temple altars, to desecrate sacred objects, to consume substances that Balinese culture designates as polluted and dangerous. Each transgression serves dual purpose. It demonstrates the candidate's commitment while simultaneously severing their connection to normal society, ensuring that they can never return to ordinary existence, even if they later regret their choice. The actual ritual through which a human first achieves separation varies across traditions, but always involves elements that horrify and fascinate in equal measure. The candidate must prepare their body through fasting and purification, though this purification serves opposite purposes to religious cleansing. Where temple rituals purify to bring one closer to the divine, Leyak preparation purifies to create a vessel that dark spirits can inhabit without destroying. The candidate sits in meditation for hours or days, chanting invocations that most Balinese would recognize as inversions of protective mantras, calling to entities that proper ritual is designed to repel. When the spirits finally answer, their arrival is unmistakable. The air grows thick and resistant. Shadows move with intelligence and intent. And the candidate feels their consciousness begin to fragment in ways that should cause madness, but instead he opened new dimensions of awareness. The first separation is agony beyond description, a tearing of soul from flesh that violates every natural law governing embodied existence. The candidate's head does not simply detach, but must be forced apart through pure will and supernatural assistance. Consciousness splitting between what remains earthbound and what rises into dark flight. Many candidates fail at this moment, their will breaking under the impossible strain, their minds shattering rather than fragmenting cleanly. Those who fail either die immediately, their divided consciousness unable to reunite, or survive as damaged husks, neither fully human nor successfully transformed, existing in a twilight state that villagers recognize as touched by darkness but not fully consumed by it. Those who succeed, who endure the agony and complete the first separation, find themselves forever changed. The second separation is easier, the third easier still, until the transformation becomes almost routine, something that requires no more effort than breathing or walking. But with this ease comes a price that grows heavier with each passing year. The practitioner finds their attachment to normal human existence gradually eroding. Food loses its flavor. Ordinary pleasures their appeal. The only thing that brings genuine satisfaction is the hunt, the consumption of life force, the exercise of supernatural power that sets them apart from and above their former peers. They have traded their humanity for power, and like all such bargains, the terms cannot be renegotiated once accepted. The Balinese understanding of these origins carries profound implications for how the community views and responds to Leyak threats. If the practice is inherited, forced upon unwilling victims, then practitioners deserve some measure of compassion even as their actions must be prevented. If the practice is chosen, embraced willingly by those who crave power regardless of cost, then practitioners deserve nothing but destruction. The truth likely lies somewhere between these extremes, with individual motivations and circumstances creating complex moral landscapes that resist simple judgment. A woman who becomes Leyak to protect her family from other practitioners operates from different moral logic than one who seeks the power purely for personal gratification. Yet regardless of how or why someone becomes a Leyak, the transformation itself represents a fundamental rupture in the natural order. It is knowledge that humanity was never meant to possess, power that comes at costs too terrible to justify, communion with forces that corrupt everything they touch. The origin of the Leyak practice is ultimately the origin of a specific kind of evil. The evil that comes from choosing darkness with full awareness of what that choice entails. From crossing boundaries knowing they exist to protect not just society, but the individual soul itself. Southeast Asia is a region bound together by more than geography, more than the warm waters that lap against countless islands and peninsulas. It is bound by shared nightmares, by supernatural fears that transcend political boundaries and cultural differences, by monsters that wear different names but emerge from the same primal terror of transformation and predation. The Leyak of Bali does not hunt in isolation, but belongs to a family of entities that haunt the collective imagination of this entire region. Her closest relative, her sister in darkness across the narrow straits that separate Indonesia from Malaysia, is the Penanggalan, a creature so similar, yet so distinct, that examining both reveals profound truths about how cultures shape and are shaped by their monsters. The Penanggalan, whose name derives from the Malay word meaning to detach or to remove, shares the Leyak's most defining characteristic: the ability to separate her head from her body and fly through the night in search of vulnerable prey. Like the Leyak, she appears as an ordinary woman during daylight hours, living among her community without revealing the supernatural that will manifest when darkness falls. Like the Leyak, she targets pregnant women and newborn infants, feeding on their blood and vital essence with hunger that seems to intensify rather than diminish with each feeding. The similarities are so striking that folklorists and anthropologists have long debated whether these represent two versions of a single myth or parallel developments emerging from shared cultural anxieties. Yet, to focus solely on similarities would be to miss the fascinating variations that reveal how different cultures process the same fundamental fears through different symbolic frameworks. The Penanggalan's physical manifestation, while superficially similar to the Leyak's, carries distinct characteristics that reflect Malaysian cultural concerns and taboos. When the Penanggalan separates, her head trails behind it not just undefined organs, but specifically the stomach, intestines, and other digestive organs, all clearly visible and dripping with bodily fluids. This emphasis on digestive anatomy reflects specific Malaysian beliefs about pollution, purity, and the dangers of internal processes made external. The exposed organs are not merely grotesque, but represent a fundamental violation of boundaries between inside and outside, clean and contaminated. The circumstances under which one becomes a Penanggalan also differ in significant ways from Leyak traditions. While the Leyak practice may be inherited or learned through deliberate transgression, the Penanggalan transformation is often described as resulting from failed religious discipline or interrupted mystical practice. A woman engaged in meditation or ascetic exercises might be startled at a critical moment, causing her spiritual energy to manifest in this grotesque form rather than achieving the enlightenment she sought. This origin story reflects the particular dangers that Malaysian Islamic mysticism associates with improper practice, with attempting to reach divine states without proper preparation or guidance. The Penanggalan becomes a warning about the consequences of spiritual ambition pursued recklessly. The methods by which each entity maintains her dual existence also reveal cultural differences. The Leyak's body remains in her home during separation, protected by the privacy of closed shutters and the fear that keeps neighbors from investigating too closely. The Penanggalan, however, must take additional precautions that reflect Malaysian architectural traditions and social structures. Before separating, she prepares a large vat or container filled with vinegar, a detail that appears consistently across different regional variations of the myth. Upon returning before dawn, she must soak her trailing organs in this vinegar to shrink them sufficiently to fit back into her body. This vinegar detail is uniquely Malaysian, reflecting both the importance of vinegar in traditional food preservation and medical practice, and the belief that certain substances can mediate between supernatural and natural states. The hunting patterns of Penanggalan and Leyak, while targeting similar victims, differ in their specific methods and motivations. The Penanggalan is described as having an almost obsessive focus on the blood of childbirth, being particularly drawn to women in labor or who have recently given birth. She hovers near birthing rooms, attracted by the scent of blood and amniotic fluid, seeking to lap up these substances that traditional Malaysian culture considers both powerful and polluting. The Leyak, while also targeting pregnant women, is described more as consuming vital essence or life force, rather than focusing specifically on the substances of birth. This difference reflects distinct cultural attitudes toward childbirth, with Malaysian traditions placing greater emphasis on the dangerous pollution associated with birth processes. The protective measures employed against each entity also reveal cultural variations. Balinese protection against Leyak relies heavily on offerings, ritual purification, and the blessing of Hindu priests, reflecting the island's unique form of Hinduism. Malaysian protection against Penanggalan draws from Islamic tradition combined with older indigenous practices. Verses from the Quran might be inscribed on doorways, iron nails driven into thresholds, thorny plants placed around houses to catch the trailing organs. The use of thorns is particularly significant as it appears across multiple Southeast Asian cultures as protection against various supernatural threats, suggesting this may be one of the oldest protective techniques in the region, predating the arrival of both Hinduism and Islam. Despite these differences, both entities serve remarkably similar social and psychological functions within their respective cultures. Both provide explanation for the high maternal and infant mortality rates that plagued traditional societies. Both create systems of communal vigilance and mutual protection that strengthen social bonds. Both embody fears about hidden evil, about the neighbor who might harbor inhuman hunger behind a mask of normalcy. Both represent the dangerous ambiguity of female power, particularly the power associated with reproduction, birth, and early childcare. In patriarchal societies, uncomfortable with female bodily processes and female social influence, the Penanggalan and Leyak become manifestations of anxiety about women who exist outside male control. The regional variations of these entities extend beyond just Bali and Malaysia. Similar creatures appear throughout Southeast Asia, each with local names and specific characteristics. In Thailand, the Kraswi shares many features with the Penanggalan, but has her own distinct mythology and protective traditions. In the Philippines, various aswang types include entities that can separate body parts for nocturnal hunting. This distribution across the region suggests either ancient cultural exchange, perhaps dating back to maritime trade networks that connected these areas for millennia, or independent development of similar myths in response to similar environmental and social pressures. The academic debate continues, but for the people living with these beliefs, the origin matters less than the very real fear that these entities inspire. What makes the relationship between Leyak and Penanggalan particularly fascinating is how closely they mirror each other while serving distinct cultural needs. They are like twins separated at birth, raised in different households, developing different mannerisms and preferences, but sharing the same fundamental. To encounter one is to understand something about the other. Yet to truly know either requires understanding the specific cultural soil in which each has taken root. The Leyak cannot be fully comprehended without understanding Balinese Hinduism. The concept of RWA Bhinada, the intricate system of offerings and purifications that structure daily life. The Penanggalan cannot be understood apart from Malaysian Islamic mysticism, beliefs about pollution and purity, the particular anxieties about female power and childbirth that shaped traditional Malay society. For the modern observer, the existence of these parallel myths raises intriguing questions about universal human fears and culturally specific expressions of those fears. Why do so many cultures across the world develop myths of detached heads or separated body parts? What does this say about human anxiety regarding bodily integrity? The fear that we might come apart, that the unity we take for granted is actually fragile and conditional. Why do these separated entities so consistently target pregnant women and children? What does this reveal about the profound vulnerability humans feel regarding reproduction and the continuation of lineages? The Leyak and Penanggalan, sisters in darkness across the narrow seas, offer no easy answers but pose these questions with particular intensity. To live in Bali is to dwell within an intricate architecture of protection, a multi-layered system of spiritual defenses that transforms the entire island into a fortress against supernatural predation. This is not the paranoid fortification of a society under siege, but rather the calm, methodical maintenance of boundaries between seen and unseen worlds. A daily practice so woven into ordinary life that it becomes as natural as breathing. Every doorway holds its offering, every gate its guardian statue, every compound its shrine where incense smoke rises to please protective deities and appease potentially malevolent forces. The Balinese do not wait for Leyak attacks before constructing defenses, but maintain constant vigilance, understanding that prevention requires perpetual effort, and that spiritual protection, like physical health, demands daily attention rather than crisis intervention. The foundation of this protective architecture rests upon the Kanang Sari, the small daily offering that appears everywhere on the island, like flowers spontaneously blooming from concrete and stone. These palm leaf baskets, woven with practiced skill and filled with flower petals, rice grains, and burning incense, serve purposes that transcend mere decoration or religious sentiment. Each offering is a renewal of the contract between humans and the spirit world, an acknowledgement that humans are not the island's only inhabitants and that peaceful coexistence requires constant negotiation. The offerings placed at household shrines honor ancestral spirits and protective deities, while those placed at gates, corners, and crossroads appease the Bhutakala, the lower spirits who might otherwise cause mischief or worse. This twice-daily practice, performed at dawn and dusk when the boundaries between worlds grow thin, creates a web of spiritual transaction that surrounds every Balinese person from birth to death. But understanding the Kanang Sari merely as appeasement misses its deeper function within the protective system. These offerings do not simply bribe spirits into benevolence, but actively maintain the cosmic balance that keeps malevolent forces in check. The Balinese concept of Rwa Bineda applies here as everywhere. Light and darkness must exist in equilibrium. By offering to both high gods and low spirits, by honoring both benevolent ancestors and potentially dangerous entities, the Balinese ensure that no force becomes so neglected that it turns actively hostile. The Leyak, as part of this cosmic system, responds to proper offering protocols. A compound where offerings are made correctly and consistently presents less attractive targets than one where such duties are neglected. For the protective spiritual presence created by regular offerings serves as first barrier against supernatural intrusion. Beyond daily offerings, the Balinese employ an arsenal of blessed objects and sacred materials that serve as permanent protective infrastructure. The most visible of these are the towering gate guardians, massive stone statues with fierce expressions and raised weapons that flank the entrances to temples and important compounds. These are not merely artistic flourishes, but functional defenses, their carved forms serving as anchors for protective spirits that watch over the threshold. The Leyak, attempting to enter such a guarded space, must first contend with these spiritual sentinels. And while she might possess power sufficient to overcome them, the effort required often makes easier targets more attractive. This is the genius of Balinese protection, not attempting to create absolute barriers, but making one's home sufficiently defended that predators seek simpler prey elsewhere. Within compounds, families maintain household shrines where more elaborate offerings are made during important ceremonies and where sacred heirlooms are stored. These kerries, the traditional wavy-bladed daggers of Balinese culture, are not weapons in the conventional sense, but spiritual tools that have been blessed by priests and charged with protective energy. A keris hanging in the household shrine radiates invisible influence that disturbs supernatural entities, making the space uncomfortable for Leyak presence. Similarly, certain textiles, particularly the black and white checkered cloth called poleng that represents cosmic balance, are draped around sacred trees and important structures to mark them as protected territory. The Leyak recognizes these markers and knows that violating spaces so designated invites consequences from forces more powerful than herself. The role of the Balian, the traditional Balinese healer who serves as priest, exorcist, and spiritual physician, cannot be overstated in the architecture of protection. When a family suspects Leyak activity, when unexplained illness strikes pregnant women or children, when the usual defenses seem insufficient, they call upon the Balian to diagnose the spiritual dimension of their troubles and construct more powerful protections. The Balian enters a trance state, allowing ancestral spirits to speak through their body, revealing whether Leyak attack has occurred and prescribing specific remedies. These might include elaborate ceremonies involving dozens of offerings, the creation of special amulets charged with protective mantras, or the performance of purification rituals that cleanse the afflicted space of malevolent influence. The Balian's power derives from their intimate knowledge of the invisible world and their ability to negotiate with its inhabitants. They know which mantras compel obedience from lower spirits, which offerings please protective deities sufficiently to solicit their active intervention, which herbs and blessed waters can cleanse spiritual pollution. When the Balian creates an amulet for protection against Leyak, they are not simply blessing an object, but creating a complex spiritual technology that functions as anchor for protective forces. The amulet, whether worn on the body or placed in the home, becomes a beacon that attracts benevolent spirits while repelling malevolent ones. A miniature fortress that surrounds the wearer or dwelling with invisible barriers. Water blessed through specific ceremonies, called tirta, forms another crucial element of protective architecture. This sacred water, collected from holy springs and charged with mantras during temple rituals, carries purifying power that can cleanse both physical and spiritual contamination. Balinese families keep bottles of tirta in their homes, sprinkling it in corners and doorways, using it to wash the bodies of sick family members, adding drops to drinking water to strengthen internal defenses. The Leyak, being fundamentally a creature of spiritual pollution and transgression, finds blessed water actively repulsive. Spaces regularly cleansed with tirta become uncomfortable for her presence, like how intense light drives creatures of darkness back into shadows. The communal dimension of protection reveals the social sophistication of Balinese spiritual practice. Major ceremonies, particularly Odalan temple festivals that occur according to the 210-day Balinese calendar, function as mass purification events that reset the spiritual landscape of entire villages. During these ceremonies, which might last 3 days or more and involve elaborate processions, offerings, prayers, and performances, the entire community participates in renewing protective barriers. The concentrated spiritual energy generated by hundreds or thousands of people engaged in synchronized ritual creates what might be understood as a purification wave that sweeps through the village, disrupting malevolent presence and reinforcing the power of protective spirits. The Leyak, if she wishes to continue operating in the area, must withdraw during such ceremonies or risk being caught in spiritual crossfire that could severely damage her. Pregnant women receive special layers of protection that acknowledge their particular vulnerability to Leyak predation. From the moment pregnancy is confirmed, the expectant mother becomes the focus of heightened ritual attention. Her compound might receive additional blessed objects, extra offerings placed specifically for her protection. She wears amulets that have been specially prepared by Bali with her situation in mind, charged with mantras that create protective barriers around both her body and the unborn child within. During the vulnerable period immediately after birth, when both mother and infant are considered spiritually weak and maximally attractive to supernatural predators, the room where they rest becomes a fortress of protection. Offerings are renewed more frequently. Blessed cloths draped around the space. Family members maintain watchful presence through the dangerous nights when Leyak hunger intensifies. Yet for all this elaborate spiritual technology, the most powerful protection remains something simpler and more profound: the faith and intention of the practitioners themselves. The offerings, amulets, mantras, and blessed waters function not through mechanical cause and effect, but through the sincere belief and proper intention of those employing them. A kanang sari placed with genuine devotion and proper understanding carries more protective power than elaborate ceremonies performed with doubt or carelessness. The Leyak responds not merely to the physical presence of protective objects, but to the spiritual reality they represent, the conviction and faith that animates them. This is why the architecture of protection cannot be reduced to a simple checklist, but requires constant cultivation of proper relationship with the spiritual realm. Ongoing negotiation rather than one-time fortification. The Balinese have lived alongside the Leyak for countless generations, and through this terrible coexistence, they have developed an intricate literacy of warning signs, a vocabulary of omens that allows the observant to detect supernatural presence before it manifests as direct attack. This knowledge is not written in books or taught in schools, but passed down through whispered instruction, through stories told by grandmothers to wide-eyed children, through the hard lessons learned when signs were ignored and tragedy followed. To understand these portents is to develop a sixth sense that reads the invisible currents flowing beneath ordinary reality, to notice the moments when the natural world behaves in ways that signal something unnatural prowling nearby. The skilled observer can detect Leyak activity hours or even days before an attack occurs, providing precious time to strengthen defenses and protect vulnerable family members. The night itself speaks volumes to those who know how to listen. Balinese villagers pay close attention to the quality of darkness, the texture of shadows, the subtle shifts in atmosphere that mark supernatural intrusion into the ordinary world. When a Leyak is active in the area, the night feels different, heavier somehow, as though the air has become thick with invisible presence. Sounds carry strangely, normal night noises becoming muffled or distorted, while other sounds that should not exist emerge from the darkness. Witnesses describe hearing wet, slithering sounds, like something dragging itself along the ground, though nothing visible moves in the shadows. Others report a rhythmic sound, almost like labored breathing, but not quite human, pulsing through the darkness in ways that make the heart race and the skin prickle with primal fear. Visual signs provide the most dramatic warnings, though they require courage to witness and interpret correctly. Strange lights appear in locations where no lights should be, particularly in graveyards, cremation grounds, and other places associated with death and spiritual transition. These are not the steady glow of lanterns or the flickering of ordinary fire, but lights that move with intelligence and purpose. bobbing through the darkness in ways that suggest conscious direction. The lights might be blue or green or sometimes a sickly yellow, colors that rarely produces in fire, glowing with an intensity that seems to pulse in rhythm with some unseen heartbeat. Traditional Balinese knowledge identifies these lights as the luminescence of the Leyak's elongated tongue, that grotesque appendage that guides her through darkness toward vulnerable prey. To see such lights near one's home, particularly hovering near windows or circling the compound, is to know with terrible certainty that the Leyak has marked the location for potential attack. Animal behavior provides another crucial layer of warning. For creatures possess sensitivities to supernatural presence that humans have largely lost. Dogs are particularly reliable indicators, their behavior changing dramatically when Leyak energy enters an area. A normally calm dog will become agitated without apparent cause, whining and backing away from empty spaces, refusing to enter certain areas of the compound or to approach specific houses. The dog might fixate on a point in the darkness, growling at something invisible to human eyes, hackles raised and body tense with fear or aggression. Cats display similar awareness, though their responses differ, often hiding in the deepest corners of homes, refusing to come out even for food. Birds fall silent when the Leyak flies overhead, creating pockets of unnatural quiet in the normally noisy tropical night. Even insects seem to recognize supernatural predation, their usual chorus of chirps and clicks falling silent, as though the entire natural world holds its breath in the presence of something fundamentally wrong. The behavior of domestic animals kept within compounds offers additional warning signs. Chickens become restless in their coops, refusing to settle for sleep, their agitated clucking continuing well into the night when they should be silent. Pigs, normally noisy creatures, might fall eerily quiet, huddling together in corners as though seeking protection in numbers. Cattle grow skittish and difficult to manage, their eyes showing whites in fear, their movements sharp and unpredictable. These behavioral changes can begin days before an actual attack, suggesting that animals detect the Leyak's presence or intention even when she is not yet transformed, sensing something in the practitioner's energy that marks her as predator even while she wears human form. Olfactory signs, while less reliable than visual or behavioral indicators, provide important warnings to those with sensitive noses. The Leyak's presence carries a distinctive odor that witnesses describe variously as sulfurous, like burning hair mixed with decay, or sickly sweet like flowers rotting in tropical heat. This smell might appear in specific locations without obvious source, wafting through compounds on nights without wind, concentrating near windows or doorways as though something outside were pressing close to the barriers. Pregnant women, whose senses often become heightened during pregnancy, report smelling this odor hours before feeling the physical symptoms of Leyak attack, their bodies recognizing threat before their conscious minds register danger. The smell serves as final warning, indication that the Leyak has moved beyond reconnaissance to active predation. Physical sensations experienced by potential victims provide the most immediate and urgent warnings. Those targeted by the Leyak often report feeling watched, experiencing the peculiar certainty that hostile attention is focused upon them even when no observer is visible. This sensation intensifies as the Leyak draws closer, manifesting as pressure on the chest, difficulty breathing, a heaviness that settles over the body like invisible weight. Pregnant women describe feeling their unborn children moving restlessly, as though the fetus itself senses danger and attempts to escape. Children who will be attacked often wake from sleep crying inconsolably, speaking of monsters at the window or shadows that move with wrong geometry, their young senses registering supernatural presence more clearly than adult rationality allows. dreams take on prophetic significance in the Leyak detection system. The Balinese pay careful attention to dream content, particularly dreams involving death, decay, or specific threatening figures. To dream of a neighbor with abnormally long tongue or glowing eyes is to receive warning that this neighbor might harbor Leyak. Dreams of flying through darkness, of looking down on one's own village from impossible heights, might indicate either that one is being shown the Leyak's perspective or that one possesses latent ability for such transformation. Dreams involving graveyards, cremation grounds, or encounters with the recently dead serve as warnings that the boundary between worlds has grown dangerously thin, creating conditions favorable for Leyak activity. The Balian, when consulted about such dreams, can interpret their specific meanings and prescribe appropriate protective responses. Environmental signs complement these personal experiences with observable changes in the physical landscape. Plants might wilt or display signs of sickness without apparent cause, particularly sacred plants kept near household shrines. Offerings placed at dusk might appear disturbed by mourning, their contents scattered or displaced in patterns that suggest supernatural rather than animal interference. Water in storage containers might develop strange film or odor overnight despite being fresh when stored. These subtle disruptions of normal household rhythms serve as evidence that malevolent forces are testing defenses, probing for weaknesses in protective barriers, preparing for more direct attack. The timing of signs matters as much as their content. Certain calendar days are considered particularly dangerous within the Balinese system. Days when the boundary between worlds grows thin and supernatural activity intensifies. These include Kajeng Kliwon, specific combinations in the Balinese calendar system that recur every 15 days, and Tylam, the dark moon when Leyak power reaches its peak. On such nights, all the warning signs intensify, requiring extra vigilance and strengthened protections. The appearance of multiple signs simultaneously, particularly on these dangerous calendar days, indicates imminent threat requiring immediate response rather than gradual preparation. Understanding these signs serves dual purpose within Balinese society. Practically, it allows communities to detect and respond to supernatural threats before they result in death or serious harm. Psychologically, it transforms the terrifying randomness of Leyak attacks into something predictable and manageable. If the Leyak's approach can be detected through observable signs, then she becomes not an arbitrary force of chaos, but a danger that follows rules and can be anticipated. This predictability, even of something terrible, provides comfort that pure randomness cannot offer. The signs become a language through which the invisible world communicates with those who retain the wisdom to listen. The 21st century has brought profound changes to Bali, transforming an island once defined by rice paddies and temple ceremonies into a global tourism destination where international hotels tower over traditional compounds and internet cafes operate alongside offerings of flowers and incense. Yet beneath this veneer of modernity, beneath the smartphones and motorcycles and Western fashion, the belief in the Leyak persists with remarkable tenacity. This is not mere nostalgic preservation of quaint folklore, but living tradition that continues to shape how Balinese people interpret their experiences and navigate the uncertainties of contemporary existence. The Leyak has not been banished by electric lights or dismissed by education, but has adapted to modernity, finding new expressions and new victims in a world that thought it had moved beyond such primitive fears. Modern Balinese hospitals provide unexpected stages for Leyak encounters, creating strange juxtapositions of medical and supernatural belief. Doctors and nurses trained in Western medicine find themselves confronted with patients whose families insist that illness stems not from biological causes, but from Leyak attack. A pregnant woman arrives at the emergency room with severe anemia. Her blood count dangerously low, despite having shown normal levels in recent checkups. Medical staff search for rational explanations: internal bleeding, nutritional deficiencies, rare blood disorders, but tests reveal nothing definitive. Meanwhile, the patient's family speaks quietly among themselves, exchanging glances heavy with meaning. Certain they know the true cause, even if they hesitate to speak it aloud in the clinical environment. They know she has been targeted, that something has drained her vital force in ways that blood transfusions cannot restore. The medical establishment's response to such cases reveals the complex negotiation between traditional belief and modern knowledge that defines contemporary Bali. Progressive doctors might dismiss supernatural explanations entirely, treating only the measurable symptoms while ignoring the cultural context that gives them meaning. But increasingly, medical professionals recognize that healing requires addressing both physical and spiritual dimensions of illness. Some hospitals now quietly permit Balian to visit patients and perform protective rituals, understanding that the patient's belief in spiritual causation affects their psychological state and potentially their physical recovery. This accommodation represents not a rejection of medical, but a pragmatic recognition that healing in Bali requires attending to cultural realities that Western medicine alone cannot address. Urban legends have emerged that blend traditional Leyak lore with contemporary settings and anxieties. Stories circulate about Leyak sightings near Ngurah Rai International Airport, the flying head mistaken for unusual aircraft by confused tourists. Young people share accounts on social media of strange lights seen hovering near nightclubs in Seminyak or Kuta. Traditional supernatural phenomena recontextualized for the Instagram generation. These modern tellings preserve the essential elements of Leyak mythology while relocating them to spaces that previous generations would not have recognized. The Leyak, it seems, has followed her people into the 21st century, haunting parking lots and shopping centers with the same hunger that once drove her through rice paddies and village compounds. The internet has become an unexpected vehicle for Leyak belief propagation and evolution. Balinese forums and social media groups dedicated to supernatural experiences accumulate hundreds of posts from people claiming encounters with the Leyak or seeking advice about protection. Photographs circulate showing strange lights or shadows that believers interpret as evidence of supernatural activity. Each image analyzed and debated with the same intensity that previous generations brought to direct observation. Videos purporting to show Leyak transformations or attacks accumulate millions of views. Their authenticity hotly contested, but their cultural impact undeniable. The digital age, rather than eroding belief in the Leyak, has provided new platforms for its expression and new methods for its transmission to younger generations who might otherwise have dismissed such traditions as irrelevant superstition. Younger Balinese navigate a particularly complex relationship with Leyak belief, caught between traditional upbringing and modern education that teaches them to question supernatural explanations. University students who study biology and chemistry by day might still refuse to walk alone at night during Kajang Kliwan, their intellectual skepticism unable to fully override the cultural programming absorbed from childhood. They might mock belief in the Leyak when speaking with Western friends, but carefully maintain offerings at their family compounds and wear protective amulets beneath fashionable clothing. This duality reflects not hypocrisy, but the genuine difficulty of reconciling two worldviews that operate from fundamentally different assumptions about realities and the invisible forces that shape human experience. The tourism industry has complicated Balinese relationship with supernatural tradition in ways both positive and troubling. Some tour operators market Leyak stories as exotic entertainment, organizing night tours to supposedly haunted locations where tourists hope to witness supernatural phenomena. These commercialized encounters often trivialize genuine belief, reducing the Leyak from feared supernatural predator to theme park attraction. Yet paradoxically, tourist interest has also contributed to preservation of traditional knowledge that might otherwise have faded. Young Balinese who serve as tour guides find themselves researching their own cultural traditions more deeply, learning stories and practices from elders that they might otherwise have ignored. The economic value of cultural authenticity creates incentive for preservation even as it risks distortion through commodification. Contemporary case studies reveal the persistence of Leyak attribution in medical contexts that Western observers might find surprising. In 2018, a cluster of pregnancy complications in a rural village near Ubud was widely attributed to Leyak activity, despite doctors identifying bacterial infection as the likely cause. The village responded not just with antibiotics, but with elaborate purification ceremonies and strengthened spiritual protections, addressing both biological and supernatural dimensions of the crisis. In 2020, during the global pandemic, some communities reported increased Leyak activity, interpreting the virus itself as manifestation of supernatural malevolence, or as creating conditions where protective barriers had weakened and predators could hunt more freely. These modern attributions demonstrate how the Leyak concept adapts to explain new forms of threat, remaining relevant by evolving its explanatory framework to encompass contemporary dangers. The psychological function of Leyak belief in modern Bali deserves careful consideration. In a rapidly changing society where traditional social structures strain under pressure from globalization, where economic inequality creates new forms of insecurity, where the future feels increasingly uncertain, the Leyak provides continuity with the past and a framework for understanding misfortune that does not depend entirely on individual responsibility or systemic critique. When a family experiences inexplicable tragedy, attributing it to Leyak attack offers explanation that preserves social cohesion better than blaming human negligence or confronting the randomness that modern rationalism acknowledges. The Leyak becomes a safety valve for anxieties that have no other outlet, a culturally sanctioned target for rage and grief that might otherwise fracture communities. Yet modern Leyak belief also reveals darker aspects of contemporary Balinese society. Accusations of Leyak practice sometimes mask personal vendettas or community scapegoating of vulnerable individuals, particularly elderly women living alone. While outright violence against suspected practitioners has become rare, social ostracism and property damage still occur, demonstrating how supernatural belief can enable human cruelty. The challenge for modern Bali is maintaining cultural traditions that provide meaning and cohesion while preventing those same traditions from justifying persecution of the marginal and the different. This balance grows increasingly difficult as modernization accelerates and traditional authority structures that once regulated such accusations lose their power. The question of actual encounters, of whether the Leyak exists beyond cultural construction and psychological projection, remains unanswerable through conventional epistemology. What can be documented is that thousands of Balinese people continue to report experiences they interpret as Leyak encounters, that these reports follow consistent patterns across different locations and demographics, and that belief in the Leyak demonstrably affects behavior, health outcomes, and social organization. Whether these experiences reflect genuine supernatural phenomena or culturally shaped interpretation of natural events matters less than acknowledging their reality for those who experience them and their continuing influence on one of the world's most spiritually complex cultures. Translate the Balinese concept of duality and balance that permeates every aspect of life on the island. Light cannot exist without shadow. Creation requires destruction. Life feeds upon death in cycles that neither begin nor end, but perpetually transform. The Leyak, terrible though she is, occupies an essential position within this cosmic architecture, representing the darkness that makes light meaningful, the danger that gives safety its value, the malevolence that defines benevolence through contrast and opposition. Consider the visual representation of this philosophy that appears throughout Balinese sacred art and architecture. The poling cloth, those black and white checkered textiles that wrap sacred trees and adorn temple guardians, is not mere decoration, but visual theology. Each square represents one aspect of the duality of reality, black and white existing in perfect balance, neither dominating the other, neither able to exist without its opposite. This cloth wraps the sacred precisely because the sacred encompasses both light and darkness, both creative and destructive forces, both protection and danger. To approach the divine in Balinese tradition is not to escape darkness, but to recognize it as inseparable from light. To understand that cosmic wholeness requires both polarities in dynamic equilibrium. The Leyak embodies the shadow side of this duality with particular intensity. She represents everything that Balinese culture fears and condemns: transgression of natural boundaries, consumption of the vulnerable, violation of the rules that separate human from inhuman. Yet her existence serves cosmic function that pure benevolence could not fulfill. Without the Leyak and other malevolent forces, the protective rituals that structure Balinese daily life would lose their meaning and urgency. Without darkness that genuinely threatens, what value would light hold? Without predators that truly hunt, what would protection actually protect against? The Leyak's malevolence is not cosmic accident or divine mistake, but necessary element that gives shape and purpose to its opposite. This understanding transforms the relationship between the Balinese and their supernatural predator from simple antagonism into something far more complex. The goal is not to destroy the Leyak entirely, for such destruction would upset the cosmic balance and potentially create even worse consequences. Instead, the goal is containment, management, the maintenance of boundaries that keep darkness in its proper place without attempting the impossible task of eliminating it. This is why Balinese protective practices focus on strengthening spiritual defenses rather than hunting down practitioners. Why communities make offerings to appease malevolent forces rather than declaring war against them. The wisdom lies in recognizing that evil managed is preferable to the chaos that would result from attempting evil's total eradication. Translate: the Hindu-Buddhist framework that underlies Balinese spirituality provides additional layers to this understanding. In Hindu cosmology, the universe operates through cycles of creation and destruction, with deities like Shiva embodying both aspects simultaneously. Creation cannot occur without the destruction of what existed previously. New life cannot emerge without the death of old forms. The Leyak fits into this cyclical vision as agent of necessary destruction, clearing away the weak and the vulnerable in ways that might appear cruel from individual perspective, but serve evolutionary function from cosmic viewpoint. This does not make her attacks less tragic for those affected, but it locates that tragedy within a framework of meaning that pure randomness could not provide. Buddhist influences add the concept of karma and the understanding that present circumstances arise from past actions extending across multiple lifetimes. From this perspective, the Leyak's victims might be experiencing consequences of actions taken in previous incarnations, working through karmic debt that manifests as supernatural predation in this life. The Leyak herself operates under karmic law, accumulating negative karma through her actions that will determine the circumstances of her future rebirths. This karmic framework does not excuse evil, but contextualizes it within a moral universe where all actions have consequences that ripple across time and existence. The Leyak becomes not arbitrary force, but instrument through which cosmic justice operates. However harsh and incomprehensible that justice might appear to limited human understanding. Translate: the concept of dharma, of proper role and righteous action, applies even to entities as dark as the Leyak. Within Balinese understanding, she fulfills a specific cosmic function, occupying a niche in the spiritual ecosystem that must be filled. Her dharma is to embody darkness, to test the strength of protective barriers, to force communities into constant vigilance and spiritual maintenance. By fulfilling this terrible role, she enables others to fulfill their dharmic obligations. Priests maintaining sacred rituals, healers protecting the vulnerable, communities practicing mutual support and collective defense. The cosmic system functions through each entity, regardless of how benevolent or malevolent, performing its designated function. Chaos results not from darkness existing, but from entities abandoning their proper roles and upsetting the careful balance. This philosophical framework has profound practical implications for how Balinese communities respond to Leyak threats. Rather than the witch hunts that plagued European history, where suspected practitioners were tortured and executed, Balinese tradition emphasizes spiritual defense over physical violence. The recognition that evil serves cosmic purpose creates restraint in dealing with its manifestations. Communities protect themselves vigorously, but avoid the descent into paranoid persecution that would create more suffering than the original threat. This measured response reflects deep wisdom about the dangers of becoming monstrous while fighting monsters, of allowing fear to transform defenders into perpetrators of equal or greater evil. The balance extends to understanding the Leyak practitioner herself as containing both light and shadow. Even the most malevolent practitioner was once an innocent child, still possesses human capacity for love and kindness in certain contexts, still participates in community life and contributes to social functions. The same woman who attacks pregnant women at night might be a beloved grandmother during the day, might offer wise counsel to those who seek her advice, might maintain beautiful gardens and create exquisite offerings for temple ceremonies. This duality is not hypocrisy, but reflection of the fundamental human condition. We all contain capacity for both good and evil. All navigate the tension between our higher and our darker impulses. The Leyak represents an extreme manifestation of universal human potential, a reminder that the line separating ordinary person from monster is thinner and more permeable than comfortable distance would suggest. Modern Balinese increasingly struggle with this traditional acceptance of darkness as necessary component of cosmic order. Western education and global cultural influences promote worldviews where evil is aberration, to be eliminated through progress and enlightenment. Young Balinese exposed to these ideas find the traditional acceptance of the Leyak's cosmic role difficult to reconcile with modern moral frameworks that categorize all predation as unjustifiable. Yet those who dismiss traditional wisdom as primitive superstition often discover through hard experience that the Balinese understanding contains profound truths about realities. Darkness cannot be eliminated only through will and technology. Evil persists regardless of material progress. The shadow side of existence remains constant across all historical periods and cultural contexts. The Leyak's role in cosmic balance ultimately poses questions that transcend Balinese culture and speak to universal human struggles with the problem of evil. Why does suffering exist? What purpose does malevolence serve? How should communities balance protection of the vulnerable with avoidance of persecution and scapegoating? These questions have no simple answers, but the Balinese tradition offers a framework for living with them that acknowledges both the reality of evil and the dangers of crusading absolutism. The Leyak teaches that darkness is eternal, that protection is ongoing practice rather than final achievement, and that wisdom lies not in denying evil's existence, but in maintaining the boundaries that keep it from overwhelming the light. The Leyak is not a relic confined to ancient myth or the fading pages of forgotten manuscripts. She endures as a living force within Balinese consciousness, shaping behavior, language, ritual, and community relationships with remarkable consistency across generations. Walk through any Balinese village at dusk, and you see her indirect influence everywhere. In the smoke of incense curling skyward, in the offerings renewed at shrines, in the subtle vigilance that infuses daily life with awareness of unseen presences. The Leyak lives in the discipline of continuity, in the gestures repeated for centuries that transform fear into structure, chaos into ceremony. This enduring tradition is not superstition stubbornly preserved, but an adaptive cultural system that continues to interpret the invisible through action and ritual. At its heart, Balinese folk cosmology remains a conversation between the living and the unseen. Every offering, every prayer, every ritual dance functions as both message and negotiation, maintaining balanced exchange between realms. The Leyak occupies a specific position within this communication network. She is the disruptive force that keeps dialogue honest, ensuring that humans never forget their vulnerability or their dependence upon spiritual harmony. Without her, the conversation could grow complacent, losing intensity and meaning. The fear of her presence, tempered by ritual discipline, keeps devotion sincere and vigilance constant. She is the adversary that ensures the believer never drifts into apathy. This delicate relationship between fear and faith manifests in ritual rhythm that structures the Balinese calendar. There are days when offerings increase, when ceremonies intensify, when communities collectively heighten spiritual defenses because calendars mark favorable conditions for Leyak activity. These rituals, though preventative, serve an additional purpose. They reaffirm identity and solidarity. When neighbors gather to craft offerings, to chant, to enact ceremonies inherited from ancestors, they participate in acts of communal reinforcement that transcend the nominal threat. The Leyak becomes catalyst for unity, the shared adversary that keeps community bonds robust through collective practice. The role of the Balian within this living tradition continues to evolve, balancing ancestral authority with adaptation to contemporary needs. These healers and spiritual mediators interpret Leyak activity not only through ancient frameworks of diagnosis and cure, but also in dialogue with modern realities. A Balian today might perform exorcisms near hospital beds, bless motorbikes for safe travel through potentially haunted roads, or create amulets encoded with prayers transferred digitally to younger clients who live abroad. The adaptability of these healers ensures the Leyak tradition remains dynamic rather than stagnant, capable of existing comfortably within both rural rituals and urban spirituality. Every generation redefines the mechanisms of defense, but the essential structure of protection and counterbalance remains intact. In villages where modern amenities coexist with age-old temples, elders continue to serve as interpreters of signs that the younger generation no longer immediately recognizes. When strange illnesses sweep through homes or livestock, behave erratically, these elders retrieve knowledge that would otherwise vanish in the noise of modern life. While tourists may photograph the ornate temple gates and the delicate offerings, these elders understand the symbolic architecture that sustains their world. the invisible scaffolding of belief that transforms visible acts into protective functions. Their oral transmission of warning signs and protective rites preserves depth of cultural knowledge that written instructions could never convey. In each whispered explanation, in each remembered mantra, the Leyak continues her paradoxical role as both threat and teacher. Education in modern Bali presents an interesting tension between rationalism and spirituality. Schools teach history and health according to international curricula. Yet within the same classrooms, children discuss traditional stories that frame natural disasters, sickness, and social conflict as reflections of imbalance between worlds. Teachers navigate these dual systems with care, framing belief in the Leyak not as contradiction to scientific truth, but as parallel narrative expressing cultural identity. Rather than eliminating traditional spirituality, education often reinforces it by contextualizing it as heritage. Students learn the anatomy of the human body in the morning and the prayers to protect it from invisible intrusion in the afternoon, embodying in themselves the coexistence of modern knowledge and ancestral wisdom that defines 21st century Balinese life. Art remains one of the most potent mediums through which the Leyak tradition continues to evolve. Painters, sculptors, and dancers reinterpret her image to explore changing social and spiritual realities. In shadow puppetry, the Leyak may appear as both villain and trickster, her scenes evoking laughter instead of fear while still conveying moral lessons about balance and restraint. In contemporary performance art, young Balinese choreographers incorporate traditional Leyak dances into commentary on environmental destruction or technological dependency, linking ancient myth to modern anxieties. Through creative reinterpretation, the figure of the Leyak escapes reduction to static folklore, remaining vibrant lens for exploring timeless human conflicts between desire, control, and consequence. The persistence of the Leyak in everyday conversation illustrates how myth becomes psychological infrastructure for cultural identity. When tragedy or misfortune strikes, invoking her name provides explanatory clarity even for Balinese too educated to believe literally in flying heads. Saying, "The Leyak has passed through," functions as shorthand for cosmic disharmony, a metaphor for hidden corruption, envy, or spiritual negligence. These idiomatic uses demonstrate that the Leyak survives not only as a supernatural entity, but as linguistic tool and moral compass. Her image moves fluidly between literal belief and metaphorical resonance, bridging psychological and religious dimensions of human experience. Technological advancement has also influenced how the Leyak is imagined and transmitted. Online platforms now serve as digital temple grounds where stories circulate faster than ever before. Young storytellers use animation, podcasts, and short films to reintroduce the Leyak to global audiences, blending horror aesthetics with spiritual contemplation. Some projects portray her not solely as predator, but as misunderstood guardian figure embodying suppressed feminine power. Aligning her story with global discussions about gender and cultural oppression. This reframing neither erases nor excuses her cruelty, but contextualizes it within the broader conversation about balance, agency, and the moral ambiguity at the heart of all enduring myths. Despite modernization, traditional ceremonies like the Unveiled cremation ritual continue to reinforce the worldview that sustains the Leyak narrative. These rites dramatize the transition of souls and the cleansing of ancestral lines, implicitly acknowledging the same porous boundaries that make Leyak transformation possible. During such ceremonies, when priests chant and sacred fire consumes the body, participants are reminded that life and death interpenetrate, that souls travel between visible and invisible realms without final separation. The Leyak's existence as boundary crosser gains symbolic legitimacy through these communal acts that celebrate transformation as natural cosmic rhythm. Even those who fear her acknowledge that she operates within the same universal system of cycles that governs divine reincarnation and human mortality alike. The durability of this belief system offers lessons far beyond Bali's shores. It demonstrates that myths need not fade when confronted with or globalization, but can evolve to interpret new realities without losing their essence. The Leyak teaches resilience through adaptation, illustrating that spiritual identity survives not through rigid preservation, but through flexible reinterpretation aligned with changing contexts. The community maintains connection with ancestral wisdom while participating fully in modern networks of trade, education, and technology. In sustaining the Leyak as both fearsome memory and cultural compass, Bali models how tradition can remain living force rather than fossilized relic from an obsolete past. The Leyak persists because she serves purposes that rationality alone cannot fulfill. She provides mechanism for emotional release, moral reflection, and communal solidarity. She converts individual trauma into collective vigilance and turns misfortune into opportunity for ritual renewal. Her story reminds each generation that power demands cost, that unseen forces accompany every act of creation, and that balance between light and darkness must be continually maintained rather than permanently achieved. Through her, the Balinese sustain the ancient rhythm of reciprocity that defines their spiritual worldview. Give honor to the spirits, guard the living, respect the dead, and remember that even the darkest forces play their part in ensuring the harmony of the world. There comes a moment, near the end of all stories about darkness, when one must step back from the specifics of horror and look at what the tale actually reveals about the human condition. The Leyak, as terrifying as she appears, was never merely about blood, flight, or the grotesque mechanics of transformation. She is mirror, reflection, and warning all at once. A being born not from hell, but from human comprehension of its own shadow. Every myth endures because it articulates something essential, something that rational explanations alone cannot capture. And in Bali, perhaps more vividly than anywhere else on Earth, that truth is written into the balance between the sacred and the profane, light and shadow, protection and fear. To gaze beyond the immediate terror of the Leyak is to confront the universal truth that all cultures, no matter how distant from one another, externalize their collective anxieties into monsters. In Europe, these anxieties took the shape of vampires and witches. In Japan, they became yokai and onryo. In the Pacific, they manifested as ancestral spirits of vengeance and hunger. The Leyak belongs to this same pantheon of mirrors, describing humanity's negotiation with mortality and moral corruption. She crystallizes something that no scientific model can quite erase: the intuition that evil is not foreign but familiar, perhaps even necessary, that it exists within the same continuum that gives rise to compassion, beauty, and love. The creature is just a vessel, a story the culture tells to explain its deepest contradictions. Bali's philosophical sophistication lies in refusing to resolve those contradictions into simple binaries. The island's spiritual system accepts that perfection is impossible, and that moral purity, like physical cleanliness, is temporary, maintained by constant effort rather than absolute attainment. The endless offerings, the incense, the prayers repeated each morning and evening are not futile gestures against inevitable decay, but affirmations of participation in a cosmic equilibrium that includes the very forces one fears. The Leyak is kept at bay, not through annihilation, but through acknowledgement, through the repeated ritual act of saying, "We see you, and we honor the power you embody." This act of recognition becomes its own protection, transforming potential chaos into structured relationship. The closing of this inquiry is not truly an ending, but a return to the threshold where we began. The veil between worlds, that fragile space where seen and unseen interweave like threads of a single fabric. Every story about the Leyak begins and ends at this crossroads. This place where night meets dawn and human understanding confronts the mysteries it cannot fully articulate. In that liminal space, knowledge cannot exist without reverence, nor reverence without the humility that fear inspires. The Balinese have mastered this delicate balance, living each day as if the invisible world were always one breath away, which perhaps it is. The Leyak's reality rests not in her physicality, but in the awareness she demands, a kind of moral vigilance that never sleeps. There are nights, villagers say, when the boundaries between those realms grow unusually thin. The air itself seems to shimmer, the moonlight turning silver objects ghostly and making the stone carvings of temple guardians appear almost alive. On such nights, dogs bark in unison, though nothing visible stirs, and mothers keep children close while elders murmur prayers older than language. These moments are reminders, as old as humanity itself, that reason has borders, and those borders occasionally dissolve. The Leyak flies then, not always seen, but always felt, carrying with her the weight of every fear that communities have ever attempted to domesticate through story and ritual. Balinese philosophy teaches that fear, properly understood, is not weakness, but awareness of fragility. To fear the Leyak is to acknowledge that life is delicate and that moral vigilance is the price of harmony. The offerings placed at dawn, the purifications, the chants, all these are expressions of mutual dependency between humanity and the unseen. It is a system less about dominance than about relationship. Humans making peace with forces that cannot be entirely controlled but can be respectfully engaged. From this perspective, the Leyak becomes emblem not of cruelty, but of the eternal dialogue between humans and their shadows. A dialogue that sustains rather than destroys. In the modern world, a world dominated by artificial light and constant noise, the Leyak's lesson becomes more relevant, not less. Technology promises to dispel darkness, yet the more illuminated our cities become, the more our inner shadows demand recognition. People still crave rituals, even if digital or symbolic, because somewhere beneath the circuitry and data remains the ancient need to negotiate with the unknown. The Leyak, reimagined for modern consciousness, invites confrontation with what we prefer not to see. Greed disguised as progress, selfishness masquerading as ambition, power severed from responsibility. The hunger that drives her through night skies and over sleeping villages is the same hunger that drives societies forward, and sometimes, tragically, over the cliff of excess and destruction. The enduring fascination with the Leyak reflects a deeper yearning to reconcile paradoxes that define the human experience. We want safety, yet we are drawn to danger. We seek knowledge, yet long for mystery. We condemn transgression while endlessly reenacting it through stories, art, and whispered legends. The Leyak endures because she fulfills these psychological functions. She allows people to look into darkness without descending into it entirely. In every retelling, in every ritual performed to ward her off, the community expresses its collective resilience, reaffirming that fear can coexist with curiosity, and that reverence need not surrender to despair. As twilight deepens over the Balinese landscape, the temples come alive with soft glow from oil lamps, each flame a tiny resistance against encroaching night. Somewhere in the distance, a priest's voice chants the last verse of evening prayer, words rising and falling in cadence that carries centuries of memory. Smoke from incense curls into the humid air, drifting upward like a bridge between worlds. And for a heartbeat, everything feels suspended. The living, the dead, the gods, and the unseen all existing together in quiet recognition. This, more than any tale of horror, is the Leyak's true domain. The awareness that all boundaries are temporary, and that understanding comes not from denial of darkness, but from its acceptance within the circle of light. So when dawn finally breaks over the island and sunlight spills across carved stone and trembling leaves, the world renews its fragile equilibrium once again. The offerings are collected, new baskets woven, new flowers arranged, new prayers whispered. The cycle continues, unchanged and yet endlessly renewed, as it has for thousands of dawns before and will for thousands more to come. The Leyak recedes with the fading stars, but her presence lingers, quiet reminder of all that must remain unseen for the visible world to hold meaning. For those who listen, who look closely at the daily rituals of Bali, there, amid smoke and sunlight, silence and song, the boundary between worlds is still intact, alive and waiting. And to those watching from afar, perhaps from another corner of the modern world, the story of the Leyak offers an invitation rather than a warning. It asks that we remember our own forgotten thresholds, the sacred spaces within our lives where mystery still breathes. It reminds us that we too carry shadows, and that wisdom begins not with their denial, but with acknowledgement of their necessity. The Leyak is not simply the monster in the dark, but the guardian of awareness. The whisper that says balance demands participation. To fear her properly is to understand ourselves more deeply, and to see that in every reflection of her terrible flight, what truly stares back is humanity's own unfinished soul. So, before stepping away from this journey, let the story settle within you, like the lingering note of a sacred chant carried by morning breeze. Carry her name with reverence, not dread. For every culture needs its guardians of contrast, and every light burns brighter when remembered by its shadow. The Leyak remains, as all enduring myths do, a living bridge between fear and meaning, horror and grace, night and dawn. And as this exploration ends, let its breath linger a moment longer, whispering softly the same eternal truth the Balinese have always known. To live is to walk forever along the edge of both worlds. If you found this story illuminating, share it, speak it, keep it alive, and continue walking with us through new legends and older shadows, here at Echoes of the Old World.